Heute geht's wieder los. Wir trinken Whisky. Herzlich willkommen zu unserem monatlichen Whisky-Talk.
Hier kann ich tatsächlich immer zu sagen, der ist für mich immer lecker, ist irgendwie ein bisschen beständiger.
Man merkt, ich kriege überhaupt nichts hin hier heute, aber ich habe auch schon am Bier gelitten.
Das hat das Schöne bei solchen Brennereien, genau die haben so ein Alleinstellungsmerkmal, was immer überall raussteht.
Wir haben hier mindestens einen 12 Jahre alten Whisky und einen 4 Jahre.
Alle denken immer so, sie müssten schottischen Whisky erstmal trinken. Das ist Quatsch, es gibt so viele gute Whisky-Brennereien überall. Die gefallen mir ganz gut. Und da sind wir auch schon wieder mittendrin. Also wir mussten ja lange warten auf diesen Livestream heute. Also herzlich willkommen alle, die jetzt einschalten, die live dabei sind und alle, die sich das im Nachgang anschauen, weil, warum auch immer, es ihnen aufgefallen ist, ach, ich hatte ja noch diese Samples, stimmt ja. Oder die einfach so nach Sascha und Daniel trinken Whisky gegoogelt haben. Herzlich willkommen, schön, dass ihr da seid. Wir haben heute wieder spannende Gäste. Also Daniel ist ja der standardspannende Gast, der ist ja immer spannend. Mal gucken, was da heute so rauskommt aus dem. Und wir haben von Nc'Nean heute Matt dabei. Matt, jetzt muss ich mal nachgucken, glaube ich, mit Hastings. Und Blender und Ambassador von Nc'Nean. Und wir sprechen gemeinsam über die Brennerei. Und ich erzähle ein paar Geschichten und Daniel erzählt ein paar Geschichten aus Hastings vielleicht. Und ihr könnt wie gewohnt eure Fragen stellen. Postet das in die Kommentare, was ihr wissen wollt. Egal ob auf Griechisch, Schwedisch, Englisch oder Deutsch. Wir kriegen das schon irgendwie übersetzt. Daniel spricht ja fließend Aramäisch, glaube ich. Aber fragen wir ihn doch selbst. Daniel, sag mal, moin erstmal. Da bist du.
Moin, endlich wieder da. Ja, ich spreche fließend. Fließend
Vor allem, ja. Ja, schön, dich wieder zu sehen.
Ja, geht mir genauso, aber irgendwie live kriegen wir momentan nicht hin, ne? Du hast viel um die Ohren.
Das stimmt, ich bin ein bisschen viel unterwegs im Moment und irgendwie sind die Tage zu kurz. Ich wünsche mir diese 48-Stunden-Tage, aber die haben nur 24 Stunden und irgendwie, genau, kriegen wir es nicht hin. Daniel schickt mir immer WhatsApp, die ich dann ignoriere und mich 3 Tage später melde und sagt, ich mag dich trotzdem noch, ich habe das nur einfach vergessen. Und genau, wenn ich ihm Whisky bringe für die Streams zum Beispiel, dann ist er meistens nicht da, weil ab und zu gehst du auch noch arbeiten, ne? Verrückt.
Ja, hilft nichts. Irgendwie muss ich das auch noch machen, ja.
Na gut, so, wir wollen unseren Gast nicht so lange warten lassen. Übrigens aber noch, bevor wir ihn reinholen. Moin ihr beiden, hallo Birgit, hallo Reinhard, schön, dass ihr wieder dabei seid. Hallo Fabian, welcome.
Hallo Fabian.
Und genau, postet gerne, dass ihr da seid. Ich sehe, es sind ein paar von euch da. Wir freuen uns, von euch zu lesen und euch zu begrüßen. Wenn ihr das erste Mal dabei seid, schreibt gerne, wer ihr seid, woher ihr kommt und wie eure Sozialversicherungsnummer ist. Und dann gucken wir mal, was wir daraus machen. Und moin Sebastian, wir haben uns heute schon in Oldenburg getroffen. Hatte noch überlegt, weiß ich auch nicht, ob ich da heute live mitmache und hat ein bisschen angefangen zu weinen, weil irgendwas ist morgen. Ich habe gesagt, mein Gott, das sind 4x2 CL, die kannst du doch wegstecken, ist doch kein Problem.
Geht.
So,
bisschen Wasser dazu.
Schön, dass du da bist, Sebastian, sehr cool. Wir sehen uns morgen auf dem Kaffee, glaube ich, ne? Komm mal rum. So, und da ist unser Gast, Mr. Nc'Nean Matt. Hallo, welcome.
Hi, how are you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too, gents.
So where do we find you? You have a guitar, you have some shakers,
Whoa, an acoustic.
Is this your student room or is it your place to work?
You are in my shed. This is the small, but well, it's not even in my house really. It's at my partner's shop. And it's just like the room I put all of my alcohol things in. So it's you can't see everything, but there's a million books. There's like a little bar. There's all the glassware for making cocktails. We're on my blending desk as we speak. I'd show you it. But it's,
everyone needs a room for alcohol.
It's the room for alcohol, and it's the little box that my missus puts me in when she's mad at me.
Okay, and after mixing a lot of drinks, you take your guitar and play some songs.
I wish I could. I'm trying to learn. I'm terrible. I play the ukulele normally, but I don't have a ukulele.
Daniel can teach you.
Yeah, and Sasha is terrible too.
Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect.
I really can. So I always fail to play the F chord on a guitar. So it's
We're
like
playing together in the school.
I break my fingers. So, zack, hier, guck mal, da ist noch jemand. André, servus, grüezi, da ist noch
Moin.
einer dabei. So, Matt, we had not much time to prepare this today, so we met 2 minutes ago for the first time. But I think that will be no problem. So we have sent to our customers 4 samples. We had the Nc'Nean Botanical Spirit for the beginning, I think. Then we have the single malt, and we have 2 casks, single cask editions, samples, cask samples. We got them from Kirsch because we always taste 4 things in our stream. So you have only 1 whiskey.
Pretty much, yeah.
So we got some parts maybe of your whiskey or some ideas for single cask whiskeys. I hope you can tell us a little bit about that, because for us, we never tried it before. It will be the first time today, and there's some letters on the bottles, but it looks a little bit special. So this is not for sale, I think.
It's definitely not for sale. It doesn't really exist. So these are the component casks that we use to make our blends. There are 3 different cask varieties that go into the core expression, but one of them we only use very, very sparingly. It's sort of like a 2%, and we've already hit our 4 dram maximum. But maybe next time we can taste the sherry as well.
Sounds good.
Okay, yes. Maybe next time. So I think for the moment that was all that was ready at Kirsch to take it to us. So I think it's great for our customers to taste whiskey that really does not exist. So
this will be the only opportunity to taste it. And
the magical tasting evening with Sasha and Matt.
Yeah, I mean, unless anyone takes my job and starts picking casks instead of me, this is a rare opportunity to do what I have to do every day.
So thank you for that. And I will say some words in German to our viewers. So alle, die nicht so gut Englisch sprechen und das jetzt nicht mitbekommen haben, wir verkosten ja wie immer 4 Proben. Nc'Nean hat eigentlich nur einen Standard-Whisky am Markt, nämlich den Single Malt. Es gab immer ein paar Sondereditionen, den Ayen und die Quiet Rebel Serie, die dann in anderen Zusammensetzungen waren, mit anderer Hefe etc. Sehr leckere Tröpfchen. Aber das sind zum einen Sachen, die vielleicht auch erst wieder kommen und zum anderen, die es nicht mehr gibt. Und wir haben gedacht, um 4 Sachen zusammenzukriegen für diesen Abend heute, haben wir einmal den Botanical Spirit. Das ist eine ganz eigene Geschichte, die wir dazu gleich erzählen können. Wir haben den Standard Single Malt natürlich von Nc'Nean heute am Start. Und wir haben über den Deutschland-Importeur 2 Fassproben abgefüllt bekommen. Also Nc'Nean hat die quasi an Kirsch geschickt, die sagen können, hey, das sind die Teile, aus denen der Single Malt eigentlich besteht, Teile, mit denen wir den blenden. Ja, wir haben ja gelernt in den letzten 300 Gesprächen, Single Malt ist eigentlich auch ein Blend aus ganz vielen Fässern. Und hier haben wir eben Teile, aus denen, wie das komponiert wird. Und diese Sachen gibt es eigentlich nicht. Die kann man nicht kaufen. Und deswegen war das auch so limitiert heute, weil wir eben pro Flasche nur 550 Milliliter zur Verfügung hatten, im Maximum oder von diesen beiden und dann einfach nichts mehr da hatten. Und Daniel wollte auch noch einen Schluck abhaben und ich ja auch. Deswegen haben wir das sehr limitiert heute und ich bin wirklich froh, dass wir euch sowas anbieten konnten. Zum normalen Preis wie immer. Das ist ja im Prinzip so ein bisschen Handlinggebühr mehr, was wir da nehmen. Schön, dass ihr dabei seid auf jeden Fall und das mit uns heute verkosten könnt. Sehr, sehr schön. So, Matt, we will maybe start introducing your distillery. So I know a lot about it and can tell maybe 2 hours about your distillery, but I think for our customers, it's totally interesting to get some information from you. So what is Nc'Nean? Yeah, what is your job? And why don't we talk to Annabelle today?
That's a lot of big questions.
Yeah.
Okay. If we go in reverse order, I think Annabelle is perpetually busy.
Me too.
Doing a million things, so I'm not sure why she's not joining us specifically today. the middle question was, what do I do? So I'm Matt. I'm the blender for Nc'Nean. So I look after the warehouse. I pick the casks. I make the whiskies, and then they get released. I also do a million other things for the company. We are teeny tiny and brand new, which means that we hire lots of people that can do many different things. So I also look after all the bars and restaurants in the UK. I do a lot of sort of international travel and conversations like this online. I also do a lot of the photography and videography for the company. So if you follow us on Instagram and you see all the pretty pictures and the pretty videos, it's normally me that's taken them. And then just a bunch of other things. It's all little tasks, but it's what happens when you work for a very small company that is trying to do a lot in a very big space that's dominated by brands that can hire infinitely more people than us and do many more things.
Okay, but
and then
especially in Germany, I think you have a very special marketing tool. You got one, but you did not know it before, and that was Arte. So
yes,
it was an Arte documentary about your distillery, and always when they repeat it on TV, our sales on Nc'Nean are rising.
They disappear. Yeah, and we noticed as well. Yeah, so it came about in such a lovely organic way. The filmmaker who discovered us was just in a whiskey shop in Germany, picked up our bottle, thought, wow, that's a beautiful bottle, started talking to the person who owned the shop, and he sort of explained a part of our story and what Nc'Nean's all about. And she was like, yeah, that's wonderful, I'm going to go make a documentary about them, and did. So so she came up to the distillery for a week and shot a lot of beautiful stuff, and then it got put out on Arte, and we couldn't have hoped for a better piece of a better way to introduce ourselves to the German market, because we really took off almost overnight. I think it was first shown in like kind of December time, when people are at home a little bit maybe bored, watching TV, looking for new things, and then this wonderful sustainable female founded, predominantly female run organic whiskey distillery. So it's all the check boxes that Germans love.
True.
So that really helped. Obviously, our sales flew. I think in January, Kirsch had to order 10 times as much as they normally order, and they kept on that level for a really long time. I remember doing a trade show in Nuremberg, maybe 4 or 5 months later, and we had a stand at the front, and like we were right at the entrance, so people would walk in and see Nc'Nean straight away. And we had so many people come over and like, oh wow, it's so cool that you're here. We've seen it on the Arte documentary. We've not been able to taste it because we can't get hold of anything. I'm like, what do you mean you can't get hold of anything? I send like half of everything that I make to Germany. There's no way you can't buy a bottle.
Crazy.
So yeah,
I remember when the documentary started. Before we had Nc'Nean in our stock since the first batch, and it was we liked it from the first moment and loved it from the first moment. We had it in 1 or 2 tastings and said it's such a young whiskey, but it's so great and we love it. And it was always how old is it? 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a very special bottle. Looks like a lady whiskey. It's like, yes, it's a lady whiskey. It's made from and so here's the story. And okay, yes, okay. But nobody ordered it ever in our online shop. We're a very small shop, and we have maybe normally we have 6 or 7 orders a day. So we are really a small online shop, and so we came from the normal shops. And in our online shop, one day we had 10 or 12 orders on Nc'Nean. What happened here? So why do they order Nc'Nean? Is there maybe a special batch or what? And then I heard about your documentary, and since then, every time they repeat it, it's so okay. We have 10 orders only Nc'Nean. That's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm glad we found our audience.
Thank you, Arte.
Yeah.
Thank you, Arte. Yeah, big thank you to Arte. They're fantastic.
Okay, so telling your story maybe is telling a little bit about the botanical spirit, I think, because when you found a new distillery, it's always you have to wait a long time to sell your first whiskey. And I think I do not know exactly when you when did you start the botanical spirit? Was it one of your first products?
It was,
years
yeah.
Before
So
you
it was
launched the whiskey.
So we launched it. I think it was 2018, 2019. It was just before I joined Nc'Nean. It was also not part of the plan at all. I know everyone looks at it the way that you look at every other distillery of like, oh, cash flow's tight, they need to release something before they have whiskey, so they've done this. We are in a very privileged and lucky position. We've got very patient and affluent investors that aren't necessarily interested in turning a profit. Obviously, they want a profit. Everyone enters a business to make profit, but the goal for them is the success of Nc'Nean as an entity, and that requires patience. And they're more than happy to wait. So, in our original business plan, there was no release until we had whiskey. There was nothing, but we had a number of people visit us. But we had a French distiller come and visit the distillery, have a conversation with Annabelle, and tasted the new make spirit, our unaged whiskey. And this distiller was that immediate switch, like, this is amazing. You have to release this. This is the most delicious thing. We would love more people to be able to taste this, and not just the lucky individuals that get to go to the distillery and try it there. Which Annabelle listened to, but also really didn't want to just release new make spirit. We've seen other distilleries do it, and if that's the route they want to go down, we're happy with that. For us, we only ever want to release products, let's say, things that have a tangible use. New make is one of those things where you taste it once and go, oh wow, that was interesting, but you're never going to order it on a Friday and Saturday night at the bar. Like, it's not the kind of thing that you're going to go back to. But this sort of perception of quality of spirit was something that Annabelle really wanted to put forward, and she also very adamantly didn't want to make gin, because that is one of the norms for a new distillery. Let's make gin for 3-5 years, and then we can focus on the whiskey afterwards. We didn't fancy competing in the gin market, but we did want to release something. So how can we release the new make, but also turn it into a product that you might come back to and try again and order again, and find useful? So the botanical spirit is that kind of halfway house between the two. It is made the same way that you make gin. You use it the same way that you use gin. So this with tonic water, this in a Clover Club, this in a Negroni or a Martini. It all works. It's all very unusual and new. So it's a great way of discovering new flavors in a very familiar way with cocktails that you're used to. But the big differences, the reasons why it's not gin. Number one, of the botanicals, whilst juniper is in the recipe, it's not juniper flavored. There's juniper there, but it's definitely not a juniper forward spirit. The main flavor for us is one of the botanicals that we forage locally around the distillery, which is bog myrtle. And bog myrtle, if you've not had bog myrtle before, not many people have. It's a very like citrusy version of rosemary. So it's green, floral, citrusy, fresh. And that's the main flavor of our botanical spirit. The second reason is the base spirits. So gin has to be made with neutral grain alcohol, so a spirit that's been distilled to 97.4% ABV or something similar to that, where it removes flavor, it removes texture. You get a blank canvas to put your botanicals on top of, and we didn't want a blank canvas. We wanted our spirit. So instead of using neutral grain alcohol, we use our new make, which only goes up to 71% ABV, which means it retains texture, it retains weight, it retains viscosity. And then from a flavor perspective, it retains maltiness, it retains fruity esters, it retains that kind of candy shell chocolate note that you get in really good new make. So you get a soft floral introduction to the flavors of whiskey. And it's a great way, realistically, it's a great way of tricking gin drinkers into drinking whiskey and getting them drinking what I want them to be drinking, which is our whiskey. It's that first little step on the ladder to helping along in their journey.
Yeah. So when you tell the story, it sounds totally good and natural. What I heard the first time is, okay, it's like a gin, but it's not a gin because you don't distill your alcohol to 96% ABV. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing. So it's a non-gin gin. So like kind of you take your alcohol, but you take your new make, and then you put the botanicals inside. And do you use single botanical use, or is it all at one time inside the alcohol?
Oh, so it's all 10 botanicals go into the pot and are distilled. I can't remember if we use a vapor basket as well or not, but it's not done in house. So we send our new make along with the botanicals to a partner distillery who are called Turk Distillers. They are based in Campbelltown. They make Kintyre gin. They are another sustainable production facility, so they operate their entire.
Because you need a different kind of still.
Different kind of still completely, yeah. And we don't have space for it at our distillery. So we send the ingredients away. They redistill it for us in their gin still, which is powered by hydroelectricity, and then send the liquid back to us. We reduce it and bottle it. So it's just that third distillation, as it were, where we flavour it with botanicals that's done off-site, and then it comes back to us. But yeah, from the story that you've told, that's pretty much spot on. It is new make redistilled with like a gin recipe. It's just for me, that balance of the botanicals that we use, I wouldn't call that a gin. Whilst there's juniper, angelica, licorice, coriander, which is that. I mean, that's the recipe to Tanqueray. There's those four there, plus grapefruit and chamomile, which are two slightly unusual gin botanicals. And then the last four are really the stars of the show, and they're the reason the botanical spirit exists. And they're all locally foraged around the distillery, which is heather, sorrel, bog myrtle, and thyme.
That's what Laura wrote in the comment I put in. So she's a very good nose, I think, because it's like juniper, citrus, and chamomile. So she,
absolutely spot on. Yeah, well done, Laura.
Laura, wie immer super. So, thank you, Fabian, for your comment. So, it's a good mixture of gin and whiskey. He's right.
Yeah.
So.
Wonderful, yeah. And like I say, it's a very good way of introducing sort of non-whiskey drinking friends into the world of whiskey. This is a really safe way of getting them used to the flavors that they can accept, that they can find in single malt Scotch whiskey.
Mm-hmm. Scott.
Sanjivar.
I tasted it when I met Annabelle and Amber in Hamburg. I tasted it as a first drink with tonic, and it's like you say, it's a drink to trick gin drinkers with your spirit. It tasted really good. So we had the drink with I think some
whiskey drinkers to take a gin.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
I don't want to make any whiskey drinkers drink gin, but
I like whiskey.
The problem with gin drinkers is they don't like alcohol and they don't like juniper, but they like to get drunk. So you need a lot of tonic. You put tonic on anything and they like it.
Yeah,
gin drinkers don't know how gin tastes.
They like the filler.
Like sugar.
So when we do gin tastings, we have 5 gins and they have to taste it pure. And the common face is, what's that? So,
gin.
We call it alcohol. So, okay. Yeah. Can I have tonic, please? It's always the same.
But this is a fantastic mixing spirit for introducing things to that crowd. So mixing with tonic is fantastic. I really, really like it in stirred down drinks. So things like martinis and Negronis, because you get the weight and the texture of the spirit. It makes such a glossier, silkier version of all of those cocktails, especially in Negroni. Like bittersweet flavors work really well with all of our spirits, and then when you can have this much silkier version of a Negroni that's just, it seems more delicate and refined rather than a big punch.
Okay, so I would like to share a picture of your distillery, because you said there's not that much space. Just a second. Here we go. Okay, this is a distillery building. So it's really small, but it's a beautiful garden here.
It's teeny tiny, yeah. The garden doesn't belong to the distillery. The garden there is Derek's. Derek is Annabelle's father. This is their estate. This is their farmland. Up on the west coast of Scotland. So you can see in that image. Over to the left hand side, there's like a smattering of houses just about that you might be able to pick out. That's Tobermory, so where the Tobermory distillery is, the beautiful colourful cottages.
On the other side of the river.
Indeed, and just in front of that is Calf Island, which is just a kind of plot of grazing land. And then if you look in the middle of the picture, all the way at the top, there's that kind of misty island thing poking out. That's the Ardnamurchan Peninsula.
Okay.
So that's where Ardnamurchan is.
Really great too.
Also a very good distillery, yeah. We make great whiskey on the West Coast.
Oh yes,
That's true. So when I met Annabelle and Amber in Hamburg, we had some special editions of your whiskey. We have the Hauntress edition, and we had Aeon. So can you tell a little bit about these two whiskeys, because they are a little bit special?
Yeah. So we do 2 seasonal releases per year. And then every now and again, we'll also release an Un, which it looks like it's pronounced Aeon, but it's Gaelic and it just means one. So all of the Un releases are single casks, and it will be something that I found whilst tasting casks for blending that I've gone right. That's exceptional as it is. That's not normally when you're tasting things you can go, oh, that's very good, but maybe it's a bit sweet, or that one's very, very good, but that one's really, really fruity. So it's useful on its own in a blend, but it's not like a wonderful whiskey that I want people to taste as is. But let's say I taste 100 casks, there will be like 3 or 4 that you taste and go, oh wow, that's great, that's really good, that doesn't need changing, that's a wonderful thing. And every time we do find like a chunk of those, they're the ones that get released. As you've seen, Germany sells a lot of our whiskey, so you get a lot of our single casks. So a lot of the own releases tend to end up on your shores. The first one we did was a complete one-off. We had 2 sherry hogsheads sent to us by our sherry cask provider, Jose Miguel Martin, who were down in Jerez. And they were sort of a welcome gift to the industry, which was nice, but followed up with, we've also never done these types of casks before, so can you use them and then give us feedback on them? And there were 2 different varieties. We had one that was a Pedro Jimenez hogshead, so it's a 225 litre, much smaller than a sherry cask really should be, and filled full of Pedro Jimenez, so thick, black, viscous liquid.
Yeah.
And the other one was a cream sherry cask, which is just a sweeter Oloroso style. The Pedro Jimenez was delicious, but very kind of one-dimensional, woody, jammy, fruity, sweet, and we ended up using that in one of the seasonal blended releases, the Quiet Rebels, and the other one was the cream sherry, which I adored. It was one of those ones where we're tasting it going, God, this is really tasty. It tastes nothing like Nc'Nean. This is a really bad example of Nc'Nean, because it just tastes like a really, really good sherry cask. And we were struggling of like where we would put it, who would appreciate it most, and then Kirsch said, can we have a single cask, please? I'm like, Kirsch, obviously. They'll love a small cask strength cream sherry whiskey. Yeah. So yeah, they're the own releases.
Perfect,
yeah, they're the own releases. But every spring and every autumn we do seasonal releases. So every spring we release something called Hauntress, which is the name stems from the name of the distillery, Nc'Nean. Nc'Nean is short for Nc'Nean, who is the Gaelic goddess of spirits, the forest of nature, a protector of nature. We wanted the distillery to be named after our ethos, not our location. But Nc'Nean was a huntress, and we've twisted that to be a huntress of flavor. So the Huntress series is all about experimental production and finding new flavors in whiskey by playing around with the component elements. So whilst the norm in Scotland is to play around with casks right at the end, so you'll put it in different cask varieties, you'll get different flavors. The Huntress series is dedicated to playing around with barley, playing around with yeast, playing around with fermentation, the real fundamental building blocks of spirit. And by making small changes there, how does that influence the whiskey at the other end? And we've released 2 of the Huntresses so far. The first one was a 3 yeast recipe. We normally use 2 yeasts. They're called Anchor and Fermentus. They've probably got technical names that there's no way I can remember. But Anchor is a distiller's yeast. Fermentus is a high ester yielding yeast, so you get more juicy fruit flavors and more fats, more texture, more weight, more oil. For the first Huntress, we also included the very romantically named Distillamax RM, which is a rum yeast. It was originally designed to make Martinique-style rums. And that first Huntress release, the only difference was the yeast. We used the same barley going in, the same milling and mashing, the same fermentation time, the same cut points in the still, the same cask varieties, and the same ratio for the same amount of time. And you could taste them side by side, and you can can taste the difference that yeast makes. It was a colossal difference. The Huntress that year was very mineral and very salty and very tropical fruits, and all we changed was a little bit of yeast. So like that was fascinating for me and for us to release, and we do that every year. So the last Huntress was a 4 yeast recipe, obviously, but it incorporated 2 additional wine yeasts. So we had a recipe that had white wine yeast in, and it was very light and clean and floral. And we had a red wine yeast recipe that was very funky and undergrowth and meaty and earthy. And paired, they made a very balanced, intricate, probably the most kind of whiskey lover whiskey that we'd ever made, because there was so much more kind of complexity about it. So that's interesting.
It's a very, very big topic, talking about yeast. And it's a topic nobody's talking about, even in the rum industry, in the Scotch industry. Nobody's talking about yeast, and they like it so much because it's a so important part of a beer or a wine or
exactly.
Else. So it's always, if you read on a beer or maybe in a craft beer, it's written all the hops and yeast. So
yeah, definitely. It's because it's fundamentally incredibly important. The reason that distillers tend not to talk about it, they can give a million reasons. The actual reason is that they all use the same yeast. Everyone uses everyone uses M strain yeast by Diageo, when there's nothing wrong with M strain yeast. It's a fantastic yeast. It's really efficient. It's really quick. Makes great levels of alcohol. Makes traditional like Scotch whiskey flavors if you're making Scotch whiskey. But you can use any yeast, and there's so much more potential in flavor by playing around with those early stages, especially when you're making young whiskey like us, where the yeast and the spirit influence is so prevalent.
So would you call you a craft distillery?
Sure. I mean, we're a very small distillery, and we care a lot about what we're producing. I don't know. That craft is such a hard word to pin down as to what people think it means.
I think it's more about attitude.
Yeah. In that case, then yes. I mean, our attitude by nature is experimental. That Nc'Nean is founded on 2 core principles of sustainability and experimentation. Can we make Scotland better for the planet? Can we make Scotch whiskey more interesting?
Okay, I have 2 questions. The first is about how should we continue now? Is it, in your opinion, better to try now the single malt with 46 ABV and then go to the single cask, the higher ABV?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we taste the normal whiskey and then we'll taste the 2 component parts afterwards.
For you at home, also für euch zu Hause, wir machen jetzt weiter mit dem Standard Single Malt, mit dem Nc'Nean Whisky. Den haben wir auch schon in unserem Livestream zu den jungen Wilden mit dabei gehabt. Also einige von euch kennen den wahrscheinlich schon. Einige von euch haben den schon lange zu Hause. Ich bin ganz gespannt auf Matt Tastings Notes gleich, aber ich würde Ihnen gerne noch eine andere Frage stellen in Verbindung auch mit einer Frage von Sebastian, die er geschickt hat. So Matt, I would like you, before we talk about the flavor of the single malt, I would like to ask you, because you are a blender from Nc'Nean, but are you the only blender?
Yes, I'm the only blender.
So it's a very, very big job in a distillery. So
yeah,
where did you come from to do that job?
Where did I come from to do that job?
Yeah, so I think you look like 70.
Drink a lot.
No, that's a joke. But I think, how old are you? Like.
I'm 30. I'm 34, and
okay.
I had a very unusual route into blending. I'm probably the only blender in Scotland that hasn't got a qualification in blending, as far as I'm aware.
So you need 2 hands and a nose and a mouth.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, this is my firm belief. I think blending is let's not say easy. I think anyone can blend. If you know how to balance flavor, then you know how to blend whiskey. My background is bartending. I've worked in hospitality since I was 14, and this is why I think any good bartender could be a great whiskey blender, because if you're on shift and you can make a daiquiri and you can balance a daiquiri, then you know how to balance a whiskey. It's just balancing that ratio of, is it a bit acidic, is it a bit sweet, do these flavors work together?
Okay, but yeah, how did Nc'Nean say, it's a great idea to hire the only blender without a blending experience.
Well, it's because I met Annabelle and I more or less begged her for a job. I used to run a whiskey bar in London called Black Rock. And Black Rock had a very good reputation at the time, and Annabelle used to host the shareholder meeting there. So we'd have the people who helped found Nc'Nean come down. This was sort of like Christmas time in 2019, and I just had a meeting with Annabelle to discuss her board meeting, like what time do you want the food, how many people are coming, what drinks do you want, like all the normal stuff. And then we sat down and had a conversation afterwards, and it must have been like 10 minutes, but I quickly realized that Annabelle is the most fascinating human being that I've ever met, and I really wanted to work for her. It sounds very sycophantic, but she's so intelligent, charming, relaxed. So she's a great person, and she's making something that's absolutely incredible at Nc'Nean, and I wanted to be a part of it. So at the time, they didn't have any whiskey. The liquid was about 2.5 years old in cask, which I got to taste some, and I was blown away. I was like, I can't believe how delicious this is, and it's not legally whiskey yet. That's wild. So I asked her for a job and said, I will do anything. Here's my CV. Like whatever job you have going, I want to work for you. So please take that into consideration. She found a job for me, which is very nice. My goal was always to work in production. I love making drinks and I love making whiskey. And we'd been going for a couple of months just in conversation. And working on other parts of the business, and then Annabelle said, "Oh, I've got the first cask samples down for what will be the first release of whiskey. Do you want to come around and taste them?" So, do I want to come around and taste them?
Yes, I want to.
Yeah, I live 1 hour away. I'll be there in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So I ended up tasting all those casks, writing the tasting notes, blending the first whiskey that we released, which was the Nc'Nean. Which is it was the recipe of the core expression, the whiskey that we planned to release, but just released at cask strength. We made 1,340 bottles or something in that ballpark, like just about 1,000 bottles. And it sold out very quickly. It got very well reviewed. And Annabelle just came to me and said, "I think you did a very good job. Do you want to keep being the blender?" And I obviously said yes. So that's how I became the blender for Nc'Nean.
Okay. So I shared some pictures of Annabelle because I think it's good to have a picture of that woman because she's really great. I met her in Hamburg, and it was so funny evening. It was all that you said. She's so friendly and open-minded, and we had such a nice event together. And it ends with singing a German folk song, Griechischer Wein. So we all got together and sang a German song, and Annabelle suddenly knew the lyrics. Or maybe we have been a little bit drunk.
You were rowdy enough. Speaking of my multiple roles,
it was so much fun spending time with her and getting to learn about how she acts. So, and after that, whiskey from Nc'Nean tastes double that good. So, I was asking the question because Sebastian had a question. He wrote it in English, so you can read on your own.
Perfect. So, when you're blending, do you already have a taste profile in mind when picking from different barrels and blending the ratio, or is it rather led by a certain sample as the base? That very much depends on the whiskey that I'm making. So, for the core expression, for the whiskey that we're tasting now, we're about to taste, this is always sort of set, and it's relatively consistent. I mean, it's very hard to be as consistent as a big whiskey distillery because we're making relatively small batches. But I always aim for certain flavors, and I always aim, notably in this, for like a texture experience. There needs to be the correct weight and viscosity in Nc'Nean so that you get the flavors. It should be citrusy, it should be peachy and apricotty, it should be a little bit bready and warm. There should be a little bit of, I call it caraway, some people say menthol, some people say eucalyptus. There should be like a little kind of green spice about it. All of that needs to be present. But the main thing is that the texture for me must be the same every time, and it's got to have this kind of glossy weight to it. It can't be too thick and gouty and decadent and heavy, and it can't be too thin and light and heavy. It needs to sit somewhere in the middle where we make a very light style whiskey, but I feel it's got a very long finish, and it's because of that texture. It's the actual compounds. It's long chain fatty acid esters, and they're oils, and they stick to your tongue, and it elongates the experience. So not only do you get this luscious, soft mouthfeel, you get a much longer finish comparatively, considering the style of whiskey that it is, being much, much lighter. And really importantly for us and how we present the whiskey, it makes it better for mixing. When you when you add soda water to our whiskey, it doesn't sort of, I wouldn't say it dilutes it. It shifts the texture and moves it into this unusual kind of area where it's kind of fluffy and dry and refreshing. And it's almost like aperitif style, palate wetting. And you only get that by having the correct sort of level of those long chain esters in there that give you the correct weight. So it rounds out everyone's experience, whether you're drinking it straight or whether you're mixing it.
Okay. So let's talk about this whiskey. So it's part of it's mixed out of, maybe, I don't know, how many barrels do you use for a new batch? It's like
39 and a quarter.
39 and a quarter. Okay, that's exact.
every batch of the newer style. So anything that's labeled batch 1 through to 18 is what I'd call our old style whiskey, and they were much smaller batches. They were 13 and a half casks per batch every time, which was 8 STR red wine, 5 bourbons. Oh, sorry, 8.5 STR red wine, 5 bourbons. But we now have a bigger blending tank, and we've also got more mature stock. And most importantly, our sherry casks are where I'd consider them to be ready now. So we have traditional 500-litre sherry butts. They make up about 8% of the warehouse, and the intention originally was always to use them in the blend. But when the whiskey was 3 years old, everything else was ready, but the sherry butts weren't ready. Yeah. So we left them. We got the new blending tank in. We thought this is a very good time to reevaluate the recipe. So the new tank can hold a much bigger batch. It can hold a much bigger batch than we currently make, actually. But the new recipe, we've shifted the ratios around. So there's a little bit less STR, there's a bit more bourbon, and we've incorporated just 2% sherry. And the 2% sherry is there. You shouldn't really taste it. It's like seasoning. It's like salt and pepper. It rounds out all the other flavors. Yeah. It's like putting Angelica in your gin. Like, you shouldn't taste Angelica in your gin, but it should make the coriander and the juniper pop and work together. That's how I kind of view our sherry casks, specifically in the core expression.
So the next level will be, or the next steps is to develop your standard single malt, so it will taste a little bit different in 1 year for us, because the cask getting older, maybe, or you put a little bit more sherry inside. Because to an extent,
so the recipe as it is set. So it is always in the new expressions where I've got this is actually one of my blending samples, but you can see the code. It will be, in this case, it's BR12. Yeah. Anything with like a 2-letter, 2-digit code is the new recipe, and for the foreseeable future, that will be 55% STR red wine, 43% bourbon, 2% sherry, and that's kind of set. Okay. The age of the whiskey will change year on year as our stock gets older, but we'll always be making 3-year-old whiskey. The goal of Nc'Nean is to make young whiskey. It's how we get the vibrant flavors that we aim for. I had a point then, and I forgot what I was going to say.
So now it's time to drink.
So we have to.
Now it's time to drink. Yeah.
Laura was starting with the tasting, and she had some peach and herbs. She had some
really good
cinnamon and vanilla and some pepper. Citrus. So how would you describe your whiskey?
Pretty much exactly like that.
The
official tasting notes. I always like to write tasting notes in 3s because I think it's more memorable. But we say lemon posset, stone fruit, and caraway rye bread. So lemon posset is two flavors really, but it's creaminess and citrus. So you're getting that kind of luscious texture, but you're also getting this vibrant, clean citrus lemon kind of flavor. The stone fruits that's peaches, apricots. It could be jammy, they could be fresh, but it's that kind of soft fruit flavor. And then for me, it's mostly from the STR red wine casks. I attribute it to tasting like Scandinavian rye bread, where it's been sort of spiced with caraway. So it's warm, hearty, bready. We do get kind of a bit of a jammy fruit note from the STR casks. And there's that very clean green spice.
Okay. So, also hier seht ihr auch nochmal die Flasche jetzt, die wir quasi euch abgefüllt haben. So sieht die Flasche im Ganzen aus. Also wirklich eine ungewöhnlich schöne Flasche. Vielleicht Daniel mal, ich habe Daniel Samples gestern hinter die Mülltonne zu Hause gestellt, weil er nicht zu Hause war und ich auf dem Weg von Oldenburg nach Bremen oder umgekehrt, nee, von Bremen nach Oldenburg. Da habe ich, mache eben kurz einen Pitstop bei Daniel und seine Frau fand die Tüte und sah die Flasche und sagte, oh, die schmeckt aber schön. Ne? Also sowohl der Botanical Spirit als auch der Whisky fand sie beide richtig schön. Das war halt ihre Bewertung des Whiskys. Mehr hat sie damit nichts zu tun.
Sie wusste auch nicht, was da drin ist. Also egal. Die sehen so schön aus. Genau, richtig. My wife says the bottles are so great, they look so good, and no matter what is in the bottles.
Yeah. we had it. So that trade show I did in Nuremberg, must be a couple of years ago now. We sampled a lot of whiskey that day. There were lots of empty bottles. And we didn't take a single empty bottle home. I think every 20 minutes, 30 minutes, someone would come to the stand and go, oh, this is going to be a really unusual question. It's like, I bet it's not. So, can I have an empty bottle? Of course you can.
So, I always say when they ask for empty bottles, I say only when you buy a full one. Or you have some broken glass with you.
We'd sold out at that show very, very rapidly.
Okay.
It was during the Arte craze, so yeah, all I had to give away was empty bottles.
So, okay. Daniel, du kennst ja Nc'Nean jetzt auch schon eine ganze Zeit.
Ja.
Wie kommt der bei dir an? Also wir haben ja einmal das Flaschenthema, wo deine Frau sagt, wunderschöne Flasche, voll cool. Ist egal, was drin ist, ich kaufe sie. Das ist ja so ein bisschen das, was funktioniert dann auch irgendwie. Bei
in den Tastings tatsächlich ja auch. Das ist
und
so.
auch in den Tastings.
Ja.
Wobei ja der eingefleischte, ich trinke so 40 Gramm schottischen Whisky-Typ, eher sagen würde, nee, nichts für mich. Aber wie ist deine Erfahrung aus den Tastings mit Nc'Nean?
Okay, also meine persönliche Meinung dazu war am Anfang ja auch, großartiger Whisky, richtig toll, aber ich würde ihn umfüllen, weil ich am Anfang auch dachte, so, looks like a gin bottle. But it's very great. Great Whisky, also wirklich großartig und insofern, ich finde den gut, der kommt gut an in den Tastings, der wird wirklich, nachdem er dann auch gerade die alteingesessenen Whisky-Trinker, die tun sich schwer und dann probieren sie ihn und sagen, oh, der schmeckt ja gut. Ja, der schmeckt gut. Also insofern, das kommt gut an. Ja.
So, when we have our whiskey tastings, we always do blind tastings. So we have two whiskies
every time
against each other every time. So they get two whiskies, and we do not say this is a bottle, this is a price, this is a distillery, this is the age. We only say try it and tell us your opinion. Do you like it or don't you like it? And it's like Nc'Nean bottles for old school whiskey drinkers with long words is like, show them the bottle and they don't like it, put the bottle away, let them taste it, they love it.
It's yeah, and
every time.
Good, yeah. I mean, the bottle design was very intentional, and it's not that we were trying to annoy whiskey drinkers. It's that we're trying to get non-whiskey drinkers excited about whiskey. It's the goal of Nc'Nean more broadly, is to make sure that single malt Scotch whiskey is still here in 200 years' time. The way that it's going currently, it won't be. It's not sustainably produced, in our opinion, and it's not sustainably sold, in our opinion. And part of that is that whiskey is very good at building its kind of core audience, but keeping it very insular. Everything is just about the people that already know the language, know the terminology, have invested, far too much time into getting into that kind of inner circle. It's really, really hard to get into that inner circle. There are whiskey bars in Scotland that I feel uncomfortable being in, and I make it for a living.
You have to be different.
So we weren't interested in sort of stealing Macallan customers or Ardbeg customers, but I'm really interested in stealing beer customers, in stealing wine customers, in stealing gin customers. And the more that we can grow whiskey as a category and get more people excited about whiskey more broadly, the more, well, high tide floats all ships. Like it benefits everybody if we can get more people excited about whiskey and drinking whiskey, and it extends the future of people drinking whiskey.
I love the bottle from the first moment. I said it's very special.
Thank you.
Very, very good looking in our shelves. And for us as a shop, so it's very great because we have a lot of women coming to the shop buying whiskey for their husbands or for their friends or whatever, and they are only design driven. They know nothing about whiskey.
Yes.
This bottle looks beautiful. I take it. So
Perfect. Yeah.
no matter what's inside.
Yeah. That's the goal. And I get very kind of geeky talking about the bottle because it really showcases the lengths that we go to for sustainability. It's not something that we've spoken about so far today, but the main reason that we exist is that Annabelle felt that Scotland needed to change how it makes whiskey if it's going to continue making it in the future. And that's down to every detail. So the bottle itself, it's not only 100% recycled glass. We were the first whiskey in the world to be bottled in 100% recycled glass. We also print directly onto the bottle to reduce labeling. And the ink that we use is a non-hydrocarbon-based ink. So it's water-based ink that's better for the planet. The paper label at the top is obviously fully biodegradable. The tamper seals that we use, that little kind of plasticky thing that goes around the top, that's actually a bioplastic made from wood pulp. So it's all natural, fully biodegradable, home compostable, edible if you want. I wouldn't suggest it. They taste terrible, but you could eat it. And then because we use natural wood and cork for the closure, our packaging alone currently is carbon negative by 1.4 tons of CO2 per year.
Okay, we spoke about that in the stream before because we had one live stream having the young white whiskey distilleries. So there was Raza, Nc'Nean, wen haben wir noch, Daniel?
Ich weiß, hatten wir Anna Mörken dabei? Ich glaube,
we had 4 distilleries, very young whiskey distilleries, and we told the story about Nc'Nean and about your footprint or your non-footprint.
Yeah, a very small footprint.
Yeah, and I think it's a great story, and you can see that in the Arte documentary in the complete story. So I will put the link after that in the show notes, and you can customers can watch the documentary after having this.
Oh yes, please, yeah. It's a lovely piece.
Yeah. So let's continue with the third sample. So I think it's a bourbon cask. With 51%. We filled it for our customers in small bottles.
Perfect.
And, it's like 2 cl in the glass. And for me, it's the first time to taste it. Do you have the same sample or is it kind of?
I don't think we have the same sample, but we have a similar kind of sample. If you want, I can show you my desk where I'm picking samples up from. So I've just finished blending the autumn seasonal release this year, the Quiet Rebels, which will be for Gordon. And Gordon likes very heavy, meaty, thick whiskies, which is fun because we don't really make that. So my desk currently, if I can find a way.
Whoa!
Oh. Oh no, you muted yourself.
How about now?
Yeah.
That's
now you're back.
That's
looks great.
That's mostly STRs. There's some funky French red wine casks in there. There's some sherry casks, but it's all the thick, decadent whiskies that we make on my desk currently.
I think I will come for a visit.
Yeah, just a little trip.
Yeah. Will you come to Bremen in September or November? When is it? Kirsch House.
I won't be. I will be in the United States in September because we're launching in the US and Canada. Whoa. So I need to go over and support that. I don't know when I'm next due in Germany, but I will be in Germany at some point soon because I like it.
Maybe you will meet. Okay, so what can you tell us about this special cask? So for us, it's a special cask because it's a whiskey that does not exist.
Indeed, yeah. So it will just be a bourbon cask sample. I can't remember which individual cask that we selected, but it will just be something that sits in our warehouse. So about 41.5% of our warehouse is bourbon casks. We source them from a company called Kentucky Bourbon Barrel, who just source broadly across the industry. So we've got bits from Buffalo Trace in there, from Early Times, from Jack Daniels. I don't know, again, which individual casks this will be, but
so we have a picture.
Very typical bourbon casks.
Okay.
Sorry, it's not 51.
It's 61. Yeah.
Oops. We made a mistake in labeling.
So
okay. 61. Sorry at home. That's why it's a little bit sharper. Okay.
That 61 might be
an
an estimate. FBN, so it's just the code system for the different cask varieties. FBN stands for First Fill Bourbon.
Okay.
And then STR
Easy.
obviously stands for STR Red Wine, Shaved Toasted Recharged Red Wine Cask, which is the second one we'll taste. But yeah, I mean, between the two that we're tasting, it's hard to pick a favorite. You get more of the distillery character from the bourbon casks, obviously. So this is much more of that citrusy, funky, fruity, and then a little bit of sweet kind of experience, generally speaking. I'd love to hear your tasting notes, because obviously I'm not actually tasting the same whiskey as you, but I'm tasting something relatively similar.
Sebastian is writing something that I had in my nose too. It's like a menthol or a taste of eucalyptus.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's vanilla and a bit virgin oak.
Mm-hmm. So you just get a little bit more of our kind of distillery character about it. And my sample is really good because it's one of the really silky ones. It's really thick. I don't know how oily yours is, but that's really yummy. But you should just be able to taste like kind of it's the distillate that we try to create, which is that kind of high ester yielding thing. And I mean, esters as a flavor kind of group, as a compound group, is enormously broad. You've got the really small ones that people normally talk about and measure, which is like your ethyl acetate, which is your apples and your pears. We get more mid and long chain, so we get like ethyl caprate and ethyl laurate and stuff. So like ethyl caprates are things that taste like peaches and apricots, and it's those juicy fruits. And sometimes they're really, really fresh and funky, and like like borderline fermented fruits. Sometimes they're a bit thicker, they're a bit more jammy, they're a bit more decadent. And then, more importantly, from my perspective, from a blending perspective, is getting those high levels of the long chain esters, which are fats. They are literally oil. Like a bottle of olive oil that you have at home is a bottle of long chain fatty acid esters, and we have relatively high quantities in our spirit due to a much longer fermentation using the two different yeast strains.
Okay, so Sebastian wrote. I did not mean the actual tasting sample. He meant the sample before.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, sorry, I was correct. I had it in my nose this because I did not try the standard batch, so I have no bottle of Nc'Nean here at my office. I have a lot of
fix that. I'm sorry.
To show you, but no standard Nc'Nean, just the special bottles here. Okay,
it's really great.
Oh, good. I'm glad we picked a good cask. You never know with these things. It would have been something that I'd have tasted during a big batch tasting. So if I'm making a batch of like normal Nc'Nean, I'll taste 80 or 90 single casks, and it would have been something that I'd have gone, oh wow, that's nice. Well, we can put that to one side. So yeah, it should be a good standalone example of a bourbon cask for us.
Okay, if you pick maybe Kirsch as an importer wants to have a single cask from you, do you always send sample bottles like this to them, or is getting to your
send these? So
okay.
This is what we send for sampling. I've just sent 3 more potential samples to Kirsch. That hopefully will be released over the next kind of 6 to 8 months. depending on if they're happy with them, if they like them, I'm happy with them. And they've got
But
a
you
couple
send
of
it,
different.
and there's not someone coming to your distillery and trying it as a cask. Maybe like Andre is at Signatory. Do you know Andre from Kirsch?
I don't think so. I might do.
Okay.
If I do and he's watching, I'm sorry.
So it's a big guy from Kirsch, and I think normally he lives in Scotland now, and he's at Everdauer and Signatory, and
Okay.
getting the
No, it's normally the process if we're doing an release is that I'll have a few casks in mind that I think will be useful. It will normally be that I've got one that I think this customer will love this. I know it, but I do like to give them a choice. So it's like, here's the one that you're going to pick, plus 2 or 3 others that are also good, and you can just have a taste. And then we'll sit down and we'll work with them as to how they prefer it to be released. Some people prefer sort of cask strength whiskey and untouched. I'm a big proponent of the more traditional ABVs, like old 85 proof, old 90 proof, old 100 proof. So that's 48.5, 51.4, and 57.1. I think they're all fantastic drinking strengths, and they've all got sort of different uses, especially considering how long the bottle is going to sit for. It's something that I always try and keep in mind with single cask releases. Even if I think they might taste better, like today, if they're at 48.5, with single cask, we tend to go for the higher ABVs because I know they're going to sit on shelves for a long time. And whilst the sort of if we released a single cask tomorrow, and 51.4 was maybe a bit too much for it, I know that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years time, when people actually might crack that open and drink it, it's going to be perfect. It's going to be exactly how I intend it to be.
Okay.
That's something I always bear in mind with the smaller releases, because I know quite a lot of that liquid is just not going to get opened anytime soon, and it needs that higher ABV to show well in the future.
Okay. So when you taste your cask, do you always taste it pure or with water or both?
I only taste it at cask strength, and I know I'm very unusual for doing that. The norm for blending.
That's what you came from a bar, so
exactly, yeah. This is the thing that you just do what you're used to. Blenders with qualifications tend to test at 20%, and I've watched them work. They're very good at doing that. I find it much harder to get. It's not that I can't write tasting notes. I could write tasting notes at 20%. I find it much harder to get a feel for how that cask is going to work in a blend, and it's because my experience is tasting cask strength whiskies and working with strong whiskey. So if I'm tasting something at 60, I'll know what it tastes like at 46 or at 48.5, and I know how it's going to interact in the rest of the things. Where if I taste it at 20%, I can get a good idea, but I'll probably be a bit lost as to how it's actually going to taste in the final whiskey. So it's probably not good for me in the long run, but it's how I'm think best suited to doing this particular job.
Okay, sounds good. So I made a big mistake a second ago. I put a little bit of water in my whiskey, and then we were talking, and I was thinking about water and put the whole thing in my mouth. Okay, there was a lot. Water on the right hand, whiskey on the left hand. Oh, okay, but it tastes good. That's a good thing. So it was good, but it was okay. I can't get it down now.
Okay.
So that was a little bit too much. But okay, what I really wanted to say is let's continue to the last one. So then we can talk about your distillery and your job after tasting the fourth one. But then we have a lot of old people watching the stream. They can go to bed after the fourth. And, we can talk a while and then say good night for everyone. Okay, so because we just hit the hour, we have 1 hour and 5 minutes. We don't want to take it too long. I want to, but for our customers, maybe it's better to
problem.
Under
so yeah,
2 hours.
The last sample that you have will be an STR red wine sample. Yes. This was a cask variety developed by Dr. Jim Swan. Dr. Jim Swan was our original consulting distiller. He was a very intelligent and incredible man that was exceptionally experienced in the world of whiskey. And if you think of all the good modern distilleries that you know, Jim Swan probably had a say in most of them. So Jim Swan helped consult on us, on Ardnamurchan, on the Cotswolds Distillery, on Kavalan in Taiwan, Kilhoman on Islay, Annandale, Glasgow Distillery, the Yorkshire Distillery, like a big, long list of fantastic spirit producers that really focus on making great spirit. I didn't. So he passed away 3 weeks before we started distilling at Nc'Nean in 2017. And I joined the company in 2020, unfortunately. So I never got to meet Jim. But Jim's very big fingerprint is on a lot of our operation. It's the reason we have the 2 yeast recipe. That's a Jim Swan invention. It's the reason that we use STR red wines casks. That's a Jim Swan invention. The way that we distill and our cut points to match the fermentation recipe. It's the reason that everyone went to Jim. He was very, very good at making great spirit first and foremost, not making the most alcohol possible, making the best alcohol possible. And part of that process was him developing the STR red wine cask, and that was to give sort of more intensity to younger whiskies. So the process of producing the cask, it's called STR because it stands for shaved, toasted, and recharred. We take 5 to 7 year old Spanish, Portuguese red wine casks, something really fruity like a Tempranillo, Rioja kind of thing. We'll take that used cask, shave 2 millimeters off the inside of the cask, and then toast it and rechar it. And that process not only rejuvenates the oak, so you have a fresh layer for maturation, which is very impactful, very rich. You're also going to be caramelizing any of the residual wine sugars that are left in the stave. And those caramelized sugars become big, heavy compounds that are full of color, full of flavor, full of the breadiness, full of that jamminess. It's not like a red wine cask. It's the STR thing is a very different approach, and I find it to be very bready, warm, spiced, jammy fruits, thick. And it's an incredibly useful tool from a blending perspective of having so much intensity and body and richness in a spirit. This will be like either 3, 4, or 5 years old. Like it's going to be what anyone else would deem as young whiskey, and what we deem to be whiskey, like whiskey that's ready.
Yeah. I had one question about using your cask. So we had a first fill bourbon cask. We now have these red wine casks. Do you reuse your cask, or is it? Yeah, you refill it after using it the first time?
So the bourbon casks will most likely get 2 refills. We're not old enough as a distillery to have anything that will have been through that many times. But I think when we get to that point, I think it will be a case-by-case basis, and it will be dependent on the quality of the liquid that we're getting out of the cask at that point. But I think up to 3 on a bourbon cask is sort of suitable. We are refilling the STRs, but that's kind of an experiment. We don't know how that's going to go. Yeah. So I realistically, I need to go taste some. I'm up at the distillery next week, so I'll make a point of finding some of the refill STR red wines and tasting them, because we will have refill stock from STRs that is legally whiskey now. So it should be an interesting comparison to see how much the intensity drops off between runs. Bourbons are quite predictable, and also there's a long established kind of industry. We've had 200-300 years of using bourbon casks. We know how they interact. STRs are a very new thing, and we don't really know how well they'll refill for a second time. But I'll find out very soon. But to answer your question, at the moment, yes, we refill both varieties, as long as the cask is good enough.
Okay, so I met a guy from Stowning, and he told me they only use the cask once, and after that they sell the cask to their customers. So you can maybe have a special, like on a special day, you come to the distillery, buy a new bottle, and get a cask on top. So,
right.
So
it's I think it's very dependent on the style of whiskey that you want to make. If the spirit that you're making either needs or wants more sweetness, more intensity, more vanillas, more coconut, more of the flavors that you associate with fresh oak, then obviously you're going to be using fresh oak casks every time. It's quite an expensive way of making whiskey, but it's a stylistic choice that you can certainly make. We already and from the start basically have been using refill casks. They've just not been our refill casks. So there's a big chunk of our, especially of our bourbon stock, that we mark as American whiskey casks, and it's something that would have been used for bourbon once, and then American whiskey kind of broadly once, and then it's come to us. So it behaves like a refill Scotch whiskey cask. They're actually my favorite casks in the warehouse by a mile, because they're so clean and refined, and you get distillery character that's been matured, but not it's not over the top on the vanilla and the coconut. It's more about the spirit that we make at Nc'Nean. So we've got plenty of refill bourbons now, and they're slowly becoming a larger percentage of the core expression blend, just because they're really, really good.
So how many casks do you have in your warehouse?
God knows. I can look. I can look at the warehouse sheet and find out for you. But
So is it
genuinely,
like 1,000, or is it like 10,000, or
1 million.
so I mean, we're not a very big distillery, so we produce 96,000 litres of pure alcohol per year, which is very small for a Scotch whisky distillery. I think we're the 5th smallest. Let me have a look at the warehouse sheet.
it's 96,000?
96,000 litres of pure alcohol per year.
Yeah.
To put that figure in context, a normal single malt distillery would be measuring in millions. Like a normal distillery will be 1, 2, 3 million litres of pure alcohol per year. Then you have the big boys like Macallan and Glenfiddich, and they're making like 20, 30 million per year. So us making 96,000 is substantially smaller. If I look at the warehouse sheet, I'll scroll all the way to the bottom and I will do some rough maths. In total, since we began, we've made 4,604 casks. And obviously we've used a good chunk of those. So I'd say we're hovering around, well, somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 casks or something like that.
Okay.
What can we expect in the future? Peated whiskey?
Never peated whiskey. Never, ever, ever. And it's a shame. I too love peated whiskey. I think it's delicious. It's also absolutely atrocious for the planet. And there's no way that we could justify cutting up a natural carbon sink and turning it into, well, burning it to make whiskey a bit smoky. I would love to do more experimentation in how we could produce a smoky flavor without using peat.
A refill Isla cask?
I still don't like it. I think that's just kicking the can down the road. It's pushing the problem on somebody else. Like I'm more than happy from a heritage point of view for people like Lagavulin, like Lafroig, to make peated whiskey. That makes perfect sense for where they are. It makes no sense for us historically, because we're not historical. We're a very new distillery. We're also a very sustainable distillery that can't environmentally justify using peat. I think it would be fascinating to do experiments and see if we can find new and interesting ways of adding smoke flavor to whiskey. I know, well, previously we thought it wasn't permissible. The Scotch Whisky Association, the governing body for whiskey, are quite strict in their rules, and they have their little catch-all, their catch-all rule of if it doesn't fit with what they say, then you can't do it. But recently, Glenmorangie have released something called Tale of the Forest, which they have used alongside peat, alternate fuel sources to kiln their barley. They've used heather and some different wood varieties, I think, to add. In this case, it's adding a bit more florality to their malt, and that's fascinating to me. I would love to look into a more sustainable solution for adding a smoke flavor to whiskey. The problem for us now becomes, one, will the SWA say yes, and two, can we make it on the scale that we're producing? We can't just say to our malter, oh, do you fancy chucking some juniper trees into your kiln, for example? Because it's not going to happen. So if we can find a solution where we can produce an interesting, more sustainably produced smoky whiskey, then we definitely will. because it's fascinating and interesting. But there's no immediate plans for a smoky whiskey.
Okay.
But for other new things, obviously we do the Hunter series every year. We do the Quiet Rebel series every year, which is it's the most fun I have every year, where I get to sit down with someone that works for the company and I make a whiskey with them for them from our stock. So it's a radically different whiskey every year because everyone that works for us has got different tastes, different experience in whiskey, different things that they're looking for. Annabelle, we do it in order of when you join the company. So Annabelle got to go first because she founded the company. We did Lorna last year, who was our first employee in 2015. And then it's Gordon's turn this year, our distillery manager, and hired in 2017. And all three of them have got very, very different tastes in whiskey, but also very different knowledge levels of whiskey and what they know that they like and how they can communicate what they like. Like Lorna was brand new to the whiskey industry when we hired her, and she only really knows what we do at Nc'Nean. Gordon has worked for Diageo for 25 years and started out as a panel beater making stills, and has worked in production at Oban and has drunk whiskey all of his life and has an innate knowledge of what it's about. So it's not only like making different whiskey every year, it's a completely different approach to making that whiskey for that person every year, because I have to try and understand what they want, and then how can I make that with what we produce in Nc'Nean. So that's always really good fun. That'll be coming out later this year. And we have one other thing that is going to be a German exclusive later this year that I'm not entirely sure I'm allowed to talk about, but later this year there will be a interesting batch of whiskey coming to Germany that's just for Germany.
So it's called the Matt edition.
No Matt whiskey. That's a long way off. My Quiet Rebels is years away. But yeah, this one extra batch for Germany. It's come from feedback from Kirsch and from our German customers, and it's something that I know you'll like. It's probably as much as I can say.
Okay, that's enough.
we will hear from it 1 week before it will be released.
Yeah, probably.
They're always very late with giving us information about.
Well, to give you an idea of timelines, I'm collecting the samples to blend it next week. Okay. So I will blend it next week. We'll have a recipe by the end of July, and then it will go into production at some point in like August, September. So
it sounds like
before the end of the year, probably.
Yeah,
sounds like November in our shops, maybe.
Yeah, I hope so. If we can get it in
a Christmas gift,
in a good run up to Christmas, because it's hard with the logistics. It's not only like we have to get it to you in November. Realistically, we have to get it to you in sort of September, because that's when your selling in period is for shops. For Christmas. So, but it will be here before the end of the year.
Okay.
Sounds like a whiskey that's not like you need it long before Christmas. So it's like sounds like a whiskey that you buy and you have sold it before it arrives your shop.
Hopefully, yeah. Based off of what we are creating, I think it will be in high demand, and we're also not. Well, we'll see how it goes. It might be the only time that we make it, but it's something that we've been
normally when
such
whiskies arrive at Kirsch and we get a newsletter about, hey, here's something new. But sorry, it's a special. Only one bottle each customer. It's so funny. Thank you for nothing.
We're making more than that. We're making how many bottles? I think we're making about 6,000 bottles.
Okay.
I think.
Sounds
like
that. Getting two.
And it's all going to Germany, so it's not being spread across the world. So there should be.
Maybe we get 6 bottles or 12.
There should be nicer allocations.
Okay. So Sebastian is just asking for a bottle of the next Huntress edition, because last year he even did not get one in Berlin. Maybe.
Oh wow, that's wild. We sent over 2,000 bottles of Huntress to Germany. So I'm very sorry that you couldn't get hold of one.
I think we had, I don't know exactly, 6 or 12 bottles of that, but they all were sold online before they arrived our shop. So
wow.
It's totally crazy. Sometimes it's totally crazy.
Yeah, there are worse problems to have, but I would like more people to be able to taste our whiskey.
Okay, so let's talk last time a little bit about this single cask, the STR cask, because we had some comments. Reinhard completely fell in love. He wants to get the whole bottle, I think, but this is all he has left here. And so maybe sounds like a typical German. Oh, it's a little bit sweeter. We have some wine notes. So this is what is very popular in Germany, in my opinion.
Oh, wonderful. So Reinhardt will really like the next Quiet Rebels that comes out. So that's the Gordon Quiet Rebels that's being blended on my desk. That's going to be 74% STR red wine, which is the cask variety that we're tasting here. 26% sherry and 7% reef salt, which is a red French sweet wine. So that sounds like all the things that he'll enjoy.
Yeah, sounds really good. Okay, so ihr Lieben, wir sind mit den 4 Samples durch. Das heißt, wenn es euch nur ums Saufen ging, dann haut doch einfach ab jetzt. Lasst uns auf jeden Fall eine Bewertung da irgendwie für dieses Video, einen Daumen hoch oder
abonnieren.
Oder Abonnieren des Kanals nicht vergessen. Folgt uns auf Instagram, auf Facebook. Guckt euch auch natürlich die Nc'Nean-Seite an. Aber viel wichtiger ist natürlich Heimathafen. Und wir haben diese Singlecast natürlich nicht im Shop, weil es die einfach gar nicht gibt. Die gab es nur einmal zum Probieren. Und dann hat sie irgendwer gekriegt.
Schade.
Vielleicht kommt auch nochmal irgendwas da in der Richtung. Wir werden sehen, was Matt da auf den Weg gebracht hat Richtung Deutschland. Haben wir gerade gehört, Richtung November soll da was kommen. Vielleicht noch eine Sache, was unseren Whisky Talk angeht. Wir machen tatsächlich Sommerpause und werden Ende September wieder da sein für euch mit natürlich einem Paukenschlag und werden dann ein spannendes Thema für euch vorbereiten mit ein bisschen Zeit. Wir haben jetzt erstmal auch Urlaubszeit, das heißt, ich fahre 2 Wochen in Urlaub, Daniel fährt 20 Wochen in Urlaub, der ist mindestens alles leisten und genau, danach sehen wir uns wieder und machen eine coole Folge auf jeden Fall im September. Und Laura fragt schon, gibt es neue Termine? Nee, gibt es noch nicht. Die machen wir jetzt in Kürze und werden die dann schon mal mit einem offenen Thema zumindest posten und releasen, dass wir sagen, okay, im September kommt das. Ich habe eigentlich auch die Idee, dass wir jetzt zum Ende des Jahres hin so eine Vorplanung machen, September, Oktober, November, vielleicht ein Dezember-Tasting und das schon mal einfach die Termine festlegen und die Themen so schnell wie möglich festzurren und dann können wir auch Packages anbieten, dass wir sagen, okay, wir bestellen doch einfach die nächsten 3 Tastings in einem Set und dann wird das alles schön. Genau.
Stelle 3 bis 4.
Genau, super Idee. Und genau, wir quatschen jetzt noch ein bisschen weiter, denke ich, so ein paar Minuten mit Matt und dann ist das für heute vorbei. Ich sage dir erstmal vielen Dank, dass ihr dabei wart. Und wie gesagt, abonniert unsere Kanäle. Das gibt uns auch immer quasi ein Zeichen, dass wir wissen, dass das ankommt, was wir machen. Empfehlt uns weiter und dann sehen wir uns ja in Kürze wieder, spätestens online. So, Matt, thank you very much for having a lot of time with us, spending time with us, for
You're more than welcome.
Nice samples and for blending Nc'Nean for us.
Yes. Thank you for blending.
And,
you are more than welcome.
So I think you make a really great job. So thank you very much for that. Continue your good work. And we are very looking forward what is arriving in Germany in the next month. So okay, crazy. So, but what do you have to tell us about Nc'Nean, about your job, what you were able to place until now?
Oh, okay. Gosh, that's a lot.
It's your open minute.
My open minute.
So I'm looking for a girl at age 20 to 25.
I'm happily married with children, so no.
You have to say it.
I'm happily married with children. No. The thing that I'd like people to take away from Nc'Nean is sort of understanding what we're trying to do for Scotch whisky. Where we do kind of, we say like we walk our own path. It does seem kind of antagonistic towards the rest of the industry. It's not. We are desperate for single malt Scotch whiskey to thrive and survive. We just have sort of our way of doing it, and I'd love people to move forward and think about the impact of the small decisions that they've made. It's something that we cover with Nc'Nean in every step. That we're 100% organic, not because we think organic barley tastes better. We're organic because it's better for the planet. You get better biodiversity in farmland, you get cleaner water, you get healthier soil, you get better CO2 retention in that soil. Like it's better for the planet to work that way. It costs us twice as much to farm barley that way, but it's a hit that we're more than happy to take because it is so much better for the planet. We're powered by 100% renewable energy, certainly not because it's easy or because it's cheap, because it's definitely neither of those things. But it means that we're net carbon zero at the distillery. We're carbon neutral field to gate in our supply chain. We do like a carbon footprinting exercise every year as part of our sustainability report. From barley growing in a field through to a bottle arriving at our distribution centre in Glasgow. So like the entire whiskey making process, our full carbon footprint is it's like 300-ish tons of CO2 per year, which is the same as a single commercial return flight from London to New York. So if you fly to London and New York and back, that plane has emitted as much CO2 as Nc'Nean in a year. And then we take that figure and we offset that accordingly. So that puts us at carbon neutral. And it's obviously that's a big thing, but there's so many little things. It's every little decision for us in how can we make what is not a good spirit for the planet. Like whiskey is not the best spirit. If we're going to make great alcohol that's good for the planet, we'd all be drinking Calvados or whatever. Whiskey is inherently quite wasteful, quite carbon intensive. So how can we better it? How can we do better so that in 20, 30, 40 years time, we're still able to make single malt Scotch whiskey that we know and love today, but in a way that is sustainable moving forward and that people are going to want to buy and be a part of moving forward.
That sounds really good. So
buy it.
Just like you don't even have to buy my whiskey. Encourage other whiskey distilleries to do what we're doing. We've seen impacts. We're seeing our influence broadly across the industry, which is amazing. But the more that consumers can demand recycled glass bottles, it's such a big thing. Normal glass bottles, they're called like Flint grade bottles. It will be 80 to 90% new material every time. And it takes substantially more carbon to produce them because melting sand into glass is much, much harder than melting glass into glass.
Buy whole casks.
You could also buy whole casks, but it's that all of it is just asking questions. It's something that we do, like even with like our suppliers, like the people that supply us with boxes or with bottles or whatever. We send them like a little questionnaire and saying like, do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? And it's not us saying like, oh, we won't work with you if you don't do this. It's just giving them the questions. So they go, oh no, actually we don't do that, but we definitely could. There's no skin off our back, and it makes the world a better place. So why wouldn't we do it? It's something that we got when we went through the B Corp process. I don't know if B Corp is a big thing in Germany or not, but B Corp companies are companies that kind of balance profits with people and the planet. So there's like Patagonia is a really good example. The outdoor wear brand, Innocent Drinks, the smoothies, like it's companies that try to do good for the planet, good for people, and good for their business at the same time. And we went through the process. We are B Corp certified. We've got the highest B Corp score in all of food and beverage globally. And the reason we've got such a high score is because we're constantly asking questions on every little detail. So if you take anything away from today, other than buy my delicious whiskey, it's just ask questions wherever possible. Because even asking the question, even if you don't get a great response straight away, knowing that that's what customers are thinking about, that changes everyone's perception and it pushes people down a better route. So my message is, if you buy a whiskey, buy it in my online shop. I'm on Doesn't matter which bottle, buy a bottle. Doesn't matter what bottle. It's any of the bottles that I sell. Because I am very student too. So it's very expensive. Buy whiskey in my shop. So now we're at the end. So I want to share one picture because this is in a picture what for me Nc'Nean means. It's a lot of fun and having good people around and having a good time together. And that was, I think,
4 hours before we sang griechischer Wein. So it was the beginning of a great evening, and so I would like to say thank you for your time, Matt, today. And yeah, I hope we will meet in person one day and go in a bar and you make drinks like you did it before.
Well, you've got Amber on the left there. She looks after export, so I will pester Amber for you, and I'm sure I'll be back in Germany soon.
Alright. So, also auch ihr zu Hause, vielen, vielen Dank für eure Zeit. Schön, dass ihr wieder dabei wart. Wie gesagt, neue Termine gibt es in Kürze. Stelle ich online auf jeden Fall auch vor meinem Urlaub. Ich spreche die mit Daniel ab und dann sind wir wieder für euch da. Also habt eine gute Zeit und ja, was muss man noch sagen, Daniel? Hast du noch letzte Worte?
Schöne Sommerpause und trink Whisky.
Alles klar, dann tschüss. Goodbye. Thank
Bye,
you very
friends.
much. Und
Ciao.
einen schönen Abend. Tschüss. Heute geht's wieder los. Wir trinken Whisky. Herzlich willkommen zu unserem monatlichen Whisky-Talk.
Hier kann ich tatsächlich immer zu sagen, der ist für mich immer lecker, ist irgendwie ein bisschen beständiger.
Man merkt, ich kriege überhaupt nichts hin hier heute, aber ich habe auch schon am Bier gelitten.
Das hat das Schöne bei solchen Brennereien, genau das ist ein Alleinstellungsmerkmal, was immer überall raussteht.
Wir haben hier mindestens einen 12 Jahre alten Whisky und einen 4 Jahre alten.
Alle denken immer so, sie müssten schottischen Whisky erstmal trinken. Das ist Quatsch, es gibt so viele gute Whiskybrennereien überall.